Ukraine has warned of a critical situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant as Russian strikes in Kharkiv injured 6 and sparked fires, as per Regional Governor Olesiny Hubov. A separate daytime drone attack in Dnipro has killed 1 man, injured 20, and damaged medical and residential buildings. The Global Smooth Flotilla attempting to deliver aid to Gaza has reported that unidentified unlit vessels approached its boats before departing. Participants activated security protocols to prepare for a possible interception, according to media reports. Today, the U.S. government has shut down after the Senate rejected a short-term spending measure, halting critical economic data and furloughing 750,000 federal workers at a daily cost of $400 million. Analysts warned the stalemate amid partisan divides over health benefits could last longer than past closures, according to media reports. A severe rainstorm in Ukraine's Odessa has killed at least 9 people, including 1 child, after the city received nearly 2 months' worth of rainfall in just 7 hours. Mayor Gennady Turukhanov has warned that no sewer system could withstand such flooding. A powerful 6.9 magnitude earthquake has struck the central Philippines, killing at least 60 people on Cebu Island, with officials warning the death toll could rise as rescuers search collapsed buildings. The quake has reportedly injured 147 people, damaged 22 buildings, and triggered 379 aftershocks so far. About 2,300 unionized airport workers at 15 South Korean airports began a strike today, demanding better pay, more rest days, and improved safety conditions. The Korea Airports Corporation has confirmed the action is led by the Korean Public Service and Transport Workers Union. Taiwan has rejected U.S. pressure to shift half of its semiconductor production to U.S., with the island's lead tariff negotiator declaring it will not agree to such demands. This statement highlights rising tensions over global chip supply chains and tariff negotiations worldwide. In Greece, trains, ferries, and taxis have halted their services as the country witnessed a day of general strike against extended working hours, with protests expected in Athens. The strike, organized by Greece's largest public and private unions, targets a government plan to apply the 13-hour workday cap to single-job workers. Now we look at Asia. According to a senior rescue official, the death toll has risen to 69 and over 150 people injured as a 6.9 magnitude earthquake hit Cebu province in the central Philippines on Tuesday night. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology has reported that the quake struck a depth of 5 kilometers, approximately 19 kilometers northeast of Bogo City. The tremors were also felt in many neighboring provinces in the central Philippines, as well as some regions in the southern Philippines. Rescue operations are underway as authorities warn the death toll may rise amid widespread damage to infrastructure and power lines. Hospitals on the Philippine island of Cebu have been flooded with patients, and some of the injured are being treated on beds on the driveway of the Cebu Provincial Hospital. They had also been wheeled out of the hospital building amid fears of further aftershocks. Now we move on. A Russian-guided aerial bomb attack on the northeastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv overnight has injured 6 people and sparked several fires, according to regional officials. Olesiny Hubov, governor of the broader Kharkiv region, has said that 5 of those injured have been hospitalized. Moreover, Ihor Terechov, mayor of Kharkiv, has said that the attack also sparked a fire at one of the city's markets and at some residential buildings. Meanwhile, Russian local media citing Russia's defense ministry has stated that Russian air defense units have destroyed 20 Ukrainian drones overnight.
У нас все сгорело. Вот видите, магазины наши сгорело все. Вот наши магазины. Вот пошлите, я вам покажу. Вот наши ткани, все сгорело. Мы не могли спасти ничего.
Аниматор этого магазина, вот в моем магазине как раз прилет был. Именно в мой магазин ракета летела. Второй раз уже погорает, к сожалению. Вот взяли золото, опять начали работать, но, к сожалению, опять мой магазин.
Я не спала совершенно. Оно как бахнет вот так, но и мне в окне дырка. Дырка.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at these evolving situations from both sides, especially in Ukraine, how can international institutions like UN or EU, not EU, but IAEA play in mitigating the risks posed by ongoing hostilities near nuclear facilities?
Yes, these are warning exchanges of drones. Well, what we see is basically Russian killing civilian targets and killing civilian people, whereas Ukrainian drones are primarily directed at energy infrastructure, refineries, oil pipes, and which are purely military targets, by the way. In time of war, energy infrastructure is a military target. And mostly hits on Russia are to reduce Russian capacity to export oil and gas, where the major revenue comes from. So again, we rarely hear about any Russian civilians killed, but we almost weekly, sometime daily, hear about Ukrainian civilians casualty, which basically very understandable who is fighting what. Russia is fighting civilians and they are reporting casualties weekly or even not daily, whereas Ukraine is mostly trying to liberate its territory, simple. And for that matter, trying to reduce Russian capacity. So how international institutions react? Well, in the United Nations, we had already many discussions over the last 3.5 years with most of the world united behind Ukraine. Over 140 countries support the General Assembly resolutions. ICJ ruled against Russia. Human Rights Council expelled Russia from membership. So with the exception of the Security Council, which is blocked and paralyzed by the Russian veto itself, the rest of the United Nations is very much clear on which side it stands. And the Atomic Agency you mentioned, yes, there are, as I said, concerns, and the agency needs to verify the safety of those facilities in Ukraine. Again, Ukraine is defending its territory, that's simple. And for that matter, we don't blame Ukraine for anything, because if Russia didn't start this war, there won't be any danger on any nuclear facilities anywhere, on any territory. Again, even if Ukrainian drones strike something in Russian territory, this is a result of the Russian aggression. Simple.
And Professor, now looking back at when President Trump was more active towards mediating between U.S. and Russia, it seems more quiet now. Do you think U.S. is still active in mediating as a role? And looking at U.S. also, they are going to send long-range military equipment to in support of Ukraine. So why is U.S. leading towards Ukraine now?
Well, finally, I must say, they should have done it from day one, but such an incompetent president and administration took 9 months to realize what to do. If Kamala Harris was a president, it would have been done from day one. But Donald Trump is trying to make himself great peacemaker, but he achieved nothing, zero. He didn't do anything. He talks and talks, and he meets Putin, he talks to Vitkov, he talks to Zelensky, he's pretending doing diplomacy, but without force, without keeping his ultimatum. He made many, 7, 8 ultimatums against Russia, didn't keep a single promise to impose more severe sanctions. So finally, as you say, after 9 months, United States realizes that it should support Ukraine strongly, including with long-distance missiles, including with intelligence information, including with Air Force if necessary. And that's also, we hear that a few weeks back when the United States said no troop on the ground. That's the other European countries should do that. But we are happy to provide air defense support. We are happy to provide no-fly zone and other assistance to Ukraine. So unfortunately, 9 months lost because of this incompetent administration, but finally we hear the right voices from Washington, D.C., and hopefully that may change. Well, Putin has no other option. He was very happy with the American elections because basically that gave him some extra oxygen to survive another year or two. And he's very happy with Donald Trump because exactly Donald Trump is such erratic and incompetent president, exactly what Putin and Russia want. But no longer, I hope things get where they should get. And Russia is soon defeated. Hopefully Putin will also realize that he has no options left. Apart from killing civilians, he has no option left. He doesn't advance on the battlefield. Well, he can mobilize another 200,000 soldiers, and that's also what we hear. There will be a new mobilization of Russian soldiers, more fresh meat to die in Ukraine, unfortunately, sadly. But that's what Russia does, and Vladimir Putin does. He basically sends more soldiers to be killed in a useless, bloody, unnecessary war. But until he's in power, nothing else can be expected, unfortunately.
Yes. With that, I would like to thank Professor for this discussion, but please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in the region. European Union leaders are set to discuss proposals for a drone wall to protect the continent at a summit in Copenhagen, just days after airspace intrusions by unidentified unmanned aircraft forced a temporary closure of Danish airports. Reportedly, the summit will also be the first opportunity for leaders of the EU's 27 countries to debate a proposal to use Russian assets frozen in Europe to fund a loan of more than $160 billion to Ukraine. France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands, Britain, Finland, and Ukraine have committed troops and anti-drone systems to help Denmark protect the leaders, many of whom have accused Russia of brazen violations of European airspace with recent incursions by drones over Poland and fighter jets over Estonia, which Russia denies. Denmark has stopped short of saying who it believes is responsible for the incidents in its airspace last week, which disrupted air traffic at 6 airports, but Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has suggested it could be Moscow. Russia has denied responsibility for the drones over Denmark, disputed that its fighter jets entered Estonian airspace, and said it did not intend to send drones into Poland. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Professor Veselin Popovsky. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, I think you will also again say, finally, they're doing this. How significant do you think these discussions will be going on in Copenhagen for EU to support Ukraine?
Yes, you're right. Finally, the Europeans get together and decided what they should have decided, to establish a wall of protection of any European country, by the way, including Ukraine. I wonder why they don't also offer Ukraine the same protection, the same drone wall, the same no-fly zone. They should. And if they do so, Russia will not be able to violate the airspace of any European country. Obviously, it takes a little bit more technology, a little bit more willingness, a little bit more muscle to do that, but they have all the necessary equipment, but not probably the necessary willingness, yes, to do that. So after, as you correctly said, Russia invaded the airspace of Poland, Romania, Estonia, and Denmark, already 4 invasions. And by the way, all of this qualify as crime of aggression, by the way. The unprovoked violation of airspace is an act of aggression, no less than that. So Russia already did undertake aggression not only against Ukraine, but against 4 other European countries. And that should trigger, finally, as you say, the NATO Article 4 and Article 5, which are about self-defending members against unprovoked attacks. Yes, hopefully, again, we will see that wall. We will see solid defense of any country airspace against Russian incursions. Obviously, Russia denies everything. They say it's not us. They always say that. Even in front of the plenty of evidence, they will say that. That doesn't matter what Russia says. It does matter what Europe undertakes to defend its airspace.
And in what ways could the war of Ukraine and Russia reshape regional security architectures in Europe?
Absolutely, you are right that this will be a different Europe. It will be a different security system. I think Ukraine will be in the middle of that security system. Ukrainian army and experience and knowledge and techniques and know-how are unmatchable. No other NATO member is so experienced in fighting war than Ukrainians. So Ukraine will be in the center of the European defense for many decades, I may say. So the future of European security will be a solid Ukraine center from this experience defense. And in any other instance, if that security is violated, and again, the aggressor could be probably only Russia. In the future, there should be a unified, solid, robust response. Again, things get slowly, unfortunately, because Europe has not expected that to happen after 80 years since the United Nations was created. Europe was a little bit complacent, thinking that everything will be peaceful and cheerful and beautiful. But yes, life is not like that. Life can go back into darkness, and we experienced that with the Russian aggression of Ukraine. So it's a wake-up call for the Ukrainians, for the European security to realize that and to make the necessary planning for the future. Thank you.
Professor, how long do you think Europe will take to make significant changes that they need to protect their airspace and protect their sovereignty, protect everything that they have right now? And looking at that they finally started doing this and looking at their own military preparedness.
Yes, it will take some time. It's not quick. It will also take a lot of financing. And we see good signs on that. The German parliament already adopted a big decision for the next 5 years to allocate the necessary billions of euro for defense. We see also a good sign that some of the Russian assets that have been frozen, and they will be utilized for the European defense. And that's the right step ahead, kind of borrowing from Russian assets that are in the Western Bank is the right thing to do. Obviously, one day when we have a peace deal, there will be calculations of the losses that Ukraine did suffer. And those losses have to be recompensated with Russian frozen funds in European banks. But yes, it will take a few years, and hopefully sooner than later, European defense is solid and inviolable against Russian attacks. But I also hope that the change in regime in Russia, which also I expect to happen even before the European is ready, I hope Putin will not survive further because he loses everything. And as I said, Donald Trump was his last oxygen. But even that doesn't work anymore. So once Putin is out of power, in Russian history, always the next leader blamed everything on the previous leader. Brezhnev blamed Khrushchev, Gorbachev blamed Brezhnev, Yeltsin blamed Gorbachev, then Putin blamed Gorbachev and Yeltsin. The next Russian president will blame Putin for everything. He will be forgotten. He will be shamed. And that will be the time for peace. So, well, again, not quickly, but at some point, Putin will be somewhere in prison or assassinated. And the next Russian president will blame Putin for all the suffering of all Russians. By the way, Russians suffered. They lost 1 million soldiers' lives. Not so much Ukraine. Russia suffered even more than Ukraine, if you calculate the loss of life and the loss of opportunities. Russians live in misery all over Russia, apart from a small circle of military and administrators in Kremlin. So once Putin is out of power, I think that will be the time of peace in Europe and the world.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Now we stay on this region. Estonia's Prime Minister Kristen Michael says Russia's recent air incursions are intended to distract Europe from supporting Ukraine ahead of the upcoming EU summit. The aim is to shift attention away from Ukraine and the aid it needs. Europe is now moving from being a peace project without arms to one that includes armed defense. Because of democratic processes, Europe tends to move slower on defense decisions compared to dictatorships. However, recent defense investments and cooperative mechanisms have made Europe stronger than it was 6 months ago. Let's listen into what Kristen Michael has said.
I would say on Poland's incident and Estonian airspace violation, the pattern probably is quite clear that they don't respect any boundaries. They are all the time testing these boundaries. And when you step on somebody's borders or boundaries, then you try to achieve that they are more concerned with themselves. So this is the pattern. Putin wants to have us talking about ourselves, not about Ukraine, not about helping Ukraine, not to push back Russia and Ukraine. So that is quite clear.
Estonia's Prime Minister Kristen Michael says that Russia's recent air incursions are intended to distract Europe from supporting Ukraine ahead of the upcoming EU summit. The aim is to shift attention away from Ukraine and the aid it needs. Europe is now moving from being a peace project without arms to one that includes armed defense. Because of democratic processes, Europe tends to move slower on defense decisions compared to dictatorships. However, recent defense investments and cooperative mechanisms have made Europe stronger than it was 6 months ago. Estonia's Prime Minister Kristen Michael says Russia's recent air incursions are intended to distract Europe from supporting Ukraine ahead of the upcoming EU summit. The aim is to shift attention away from Ukraine and aid it needs. Europe is now moving from being a peace project without arms to one that includes armed defense. Because of democratic processes, Europe tends to move slower in defense decisions compared to dictatorships. However, recent defense investments and cooperative mechanisms have made Europe stronger than it was 6 months ago. Now for this discussion, we go back to Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking at this news, Prime Minister Michael mentions that Europe is evolving from a peace project without arms to one that includes armed defense. Now, what do you think? What is your reaction to this news?
Well, again, I said earlier that Europe needs to defend itself and it needs to take the correct decisions mostly because of their often threats coming from the Russian Federation, including drones, including incursions by some airplanes. So it's a question of capacity to build kind of a very solid defense of the airspace. It's not easy because it's a large territory. It's a lot of airspace over Europe, and Russia has a border with every single country from Finland to basically to Romania, if we include Ukrainian territory now. So yes, it will take some time, it will take a lot of money, but the right decisions are taken, and that's the good news, that when the plan is there, when the decisions are made, then it becomes questions of financing, numbers, preparation, time. But once that defense is established, hopefully one day soon, Europe will be protected against further incursions and further threats from the Russian Federation.
And what are the key challenges and opportunities for Europe as it strengthens its defense capabilities while maintaining its democratic stance?
Yes, one challenge is the public opinion. Obviously, people are not happy when a lot of money is spent on military. For them, more important things are like education, health, hospitals, schools, children. And when the military budget goes up, nobody's happy. But that's a necessary price to pay because, as we know from the past, when states are not spending enough on their defense and they are object of attacks, people die. And the human life is probably the invaluable, the most valuable asset for the nation. So to defend itself, states need to spend on military, they need to spend on weapons. Even if the challenge is how European public will vote in the next elections. Will they support the current governments? And I hope they do. And we see that most of the elections recently do not go the way of nationalist and pro-Russian parties. The most recent example being Moldova a couple of days ago. Moldova also made the decision pro-European and anti-Russian. And all the other Eastern European countries, well, apart from Hungary, at the moment are very pro-European and anti-Russian. So yes, the hopes are that the next elections in all European countries will continue to support the right policy, which is to be prepared for Russian attack, including prepared, the public should be prepared as well. They need to understand that that needs to be done through a lot of information sharing, a lot of education. The public needs to understand as to support
Yes.
the government. The government needs to be very transparent and informative.
Yes,
Thank
with
you.
that, I would like to thank our guest, Professor Vasilin Popovsky, for joining us today and sharing your insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Africa. Violent clashes have erupted in several Moroccan cities between youths and security forces, following days of protests demanding health and educational reforms. Videos show masked demonstrators in Esgain near Agadir throwing stones, setting fires and damaging property. Similar incidents have been reported in Eit Amira, Beni Mellal and Oujda, with no confirmed injuries. The youth group led Gen Z 212 urged participants to remain peaceful and avoid vandalism. More than 200 demonstrators have been arrested in Rabat over the past 3 days. Most later released. In Casablanca, 18 people have faced investigations for obstructing traffic, including 6 minors referred to a specialized court. Morocco's governing coalition said it listens to social demands and is ready to respond responsibly. The protests follow public outrage over the deaths of 8 pregnant women at an Agadir hospital, highlighting social inequalities. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.